After almost a decade in construction and billions invested, this gas pipeline is almost done. But could the poisoning of a Kremlin critic stop its completion? I'm Ali Aslan, and today's newsmaker is Nord Stream 2. It's a massive project with massive benefits, but also potentially massive problems. Nord Stream 2 will bring Russian gas directly to Germany and could do wonders for both economies. But it's also fueling concern. Several EU nations have urged Germany to reconsider working so closely with Russia, and the US has accused Berlin of pandering to Putin. But Chancellor Angela Merkel had never wavered in her support, until the apparent poisoning of this man. Russian opposition figure Alexey Navalny has been a thorn in the side of Vladimir Putin for years. Now Moscow is accused of trying to take the Kremlin critic out. Russia denies it, but it's forcing Germany to rethink its pipeline policy. Though pulling the plug may not be that easy. Nord Stream 2 is more than 90% complete and billions have already been invested. So, can Angela Merkel really change her mind? To discuss this, I am joined now from Moscow by Vitaly Yermakov. He's a senior research fellow at the Oxford Institute for Energy Studies. And Luke Coffey is in Washington, D.C. He's the director of the Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Luke, quite a turn of events. Chancellor Merkel, for years, has defended the Nord Stream 2 project despite international criticism, particularly criticism from the United States. Now the poisoning of Russian opposition figure Alexey Navalny seems to have changed the game a bit. Chancellor Merkel has said she is reconsidering her long-held position. What do you make of all this?
Well, the poisoning has certainly changed the rhetoric. Whether or not this materializes into a change of policy, that's a whole nother discussion, and that remains to be seen. But it's not just the poisoning of Navalny which has really pushed Germany into this direction. There are a lot of other issues in the past 18 to 24 months that have also played an important role. Of course, one of them is the pressure that has been placed on Germany on the Nord Stream 2 issue by the Trump administration and the threat of secondary sanctions to European companies that participate in this project. Then, of course, we had last year the killing of a Georgian citizen of Chechen ethnicity in Berlin by gunmen, and that was allegedly also carried out by the Russian state. So there's been a number of issues in recent months that have led to this point, I think, where Angela Merkel has had no choice but to at least change her rhetoric. Again, this is just a change of rhetoric. We have not seen a change of policy yet.
All of what you're saying is true, of course, but it was the poisoning of Alexei Navalny that has changed at least the rhetoric in Berlin, and particularly on the part of Angela Merkel and her cabinet members. Vitaly, you've been following this project for a while now. Where do you see the connection between the poisoning of Navalny and the German government's supposedly, allegedly changing stance on Nord Stream 2?
Well, look, I cannot speculate about these things. The project has been politicized. The Russian government strongly opposes all these charges. Today, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs summoned the German ambassador and objected in the strongest possible terms to the accusations, which they said were absolutely unsubstantiated. But again, I think to talk about who poisoned Mr. Navalny is now the same thing as to talk about who killed President Kennedy. We don't have the information. So again, this is going to be a very speculative discussion, and I don't really want to.
Well, I'm not sure, Vitaly, if those comparisons really uphold between the killing of Kennedy and the poisoning of Navalny. Fact is that he was poisoned. We don't know. No confirmation. We know that he was poisoned in Moscow, has been flown to Berlin. He's at a hospital now, has been coming out of an induced coma. That we do know. Moscow says it has no evidence of Navalny being poisoned in Moscow, something obviously we cannot clear and determine on this show. But Vitaly, the point still remains here that this seems to be somewhat of a game changer, if not in rhetoric only.
No, I agree with Luke that the context is important. And the context is that there's plenty of gas everywhere, including in Europe. Gas prices have been extremely low all this year, and in May and June, they hit rock bottom. We have never seen such low gas prices in Europe. So there's an impression that gas is not needed, and additional gas pipeline that would bring even more gas to Europe is not needed at the short term.
Interestingly enough, yeah, go ahead.
This is a short-term consideration. Longer term, the argument I think, which I often heard about Nord Stream 2, is that this is a redundant pipeline, and I think this redundancy argument is worth looking at, because people are saying that Russia is building this pipeline just to bypass Ukraine, and Ukraine has plenty of transit pipeline capacity which could be used. And so this is just a way for Russia to punish Ukraine. I think we need to really look closely at this argument and discuss it, because...
And that's what we're trying to do on the show, of course, Vitaly. We're trying to look closely at the arguments. And Luke, you are right, of course, you have put forth some issues that have deteriorated Russian-EU relations in the past. But even the 2014, what has been internationally deemed to be illegal annexation of Crimea was not enough to tip the favor in those who have been arguing against Nord Stream 2. So this is not the first time, even if Moscow ought to be behind the poisoning of Navalny, it's not the first time that Russia and the UN, Russia and Germany have been at conflict with one another in the previous 10 years since the conflict started. Why do you think this particular incident is now having such a strong reaction, is evoking such a strong reaction on the part of Berlin?
Well, as I said, I think there's an accumulation of these events that have brought Berlin to this point. And either way, regardless if this assassination attempt was sanctioned by the Kremlin or not, one thing is very clear: Russia has a Novichok nerve agent problem. Either these attacks, like we saw in Salisbury, England, or we saw with Navalny, were sanctioned by the Kremlin, or for whatever reason, this military-grade nerve agent is floating around Russia and is able to be used by criminal actors to conveniently target political opponents of the Kremlin. So either way, there is a significant problem here for Russia when it comes to this particular nerve agent. But in terms of Germany's willingness to continue on with the Nord Stream 2 project, it just shows how embedded this project is in the German political system. Of course, the former Chancellor Gerhard Schroeder is very cozy with Vladimir Putin, got intimately involved with Gazprom almost immediately after leaving his position as Chancellor. And over the years, the Germans and the Russians have used energy as one area where there could be bilateral cooperation, often at the angst of the other countries in Europe. And when President Trump attended the NATO summit a couple of years ago, and his very first remark was criticizing Germany over Nord Stream 2, very vocally, this criticism was very vocal. He was saying what most in Central and Eastern Europe are thinking. They just won't say it publicly. But now they're starting to say it publicly. They're putting more pressure on Germany privately. And we're to the point now where Berlin has to at least change the rhetoric on this. But I am not so sure that we're going to see this project stopped, even though I do believe it should be stopped.
Vitaly, as Luke has pointed out correctly, Washington, obviously, even before Donald Trump, has been very critical of this project. But now many European countries, in particular Poland, of course, are coming out saying it should be a no-brainer. It should be a no-brainer that this project should be halted, should be abandoned at this particular point, that having Germany the most powerful nation in Europe, perhaps being so dependent on gas from Russia, is putting it at a dangerous exposure. What do you make of this argument?
Well, first of all, of course, this is not a new debate. Back in 1970, when the first deal between Russia and Europe was discussed, with first Russian gas planned to be supplied to Austria and then to Germany, the US was strongly opposed to that. And however, these deals went through, and they started 40 years of very successful and mutually beneficial cooperation between Russia and Europe. And Russian gas supplies expanded, and Europe used them for a good course. Now we are very much in the same situation when this additional incremental supply from Russia that would connect new Russian gas developed on the Yamal Peninsula by the shortest possible route, by the new modern pipeline infrastructure that was specifically dedicated to bring this new Yamal gas to Europe via the shortest possible route, is being opposed by the US very strongly. And Russian officials have been repeatedly saying that this is just unfair competition. They cannot compete economically with US LNG being much higher cost, higher carbon footprint, and generally uncompetitive with Russian gas. So they are using these political arguments in order to stop this very beneficial gas supply from Russia to Germany. This is the official Kremlin position.
And look, you have, of course, correctly pointed out that it was Chancellor Merkel's predecessor, Gerhard Schröder, who initiated the project. And for Chancellor Merkel, this was a difficult situation to begin with, because it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you go through with the project, you're possibly facing US sanctions and aggravating your EU partners. If you don't, obviously, the money and legal issues that come with halting such a project, which we will talk about in just a minute, could also be quite abundant. Do you think that this poisoning of Navalny could actually be, well, for lack of a better term, a good opportunity for Merkel to pull the plug on a project that she has been wanting to pull in order not to aggravate her allies?
Well, it could serve as an off-ramp, but as you pointed out, there's been many off-ramp possibilities for Germany over the recent years. Yes, of course, this is a project that she inherited from her predecessor, but she's been around for a number of years now, and she's fought a number of re-election campaigns where she could have established or been given a new mandate on the issue of Nord Stream 2 by the German people if she wanted to campaign, for example, on ending the project, and she never chose to. And this is because she knows that this Nord Stream 2 project will help solidify Germany's role in Europe's energy market. A lot of the focus, of course, is on how this helps Russia get more dominance, but it's also giving Germany more dominance in European energy issues at a time when Germany already has huge political dominance, economic dominance across the continent. And I think that's another reason why some countries in Europe feel uncomfortable with this. It's not only Russia having more control and influence, but it's also Germany, which many in Europe feel like Germany has a disproportionate amount of influence already.
Interestingly enough, Vitaly, let's look. We talked in detail about the political ramifications of this delicate project. Let's look at the business and legal sides of it. More than 90% of the gas pipeline has been completed. 8 billion euros have been invested up until now, and the pipeline is scheduled to operate early next year. The German Eastern Business Association, interestingly enough, says it's legally almost impossible to halt the project, saying Germany could be held liable here. What do you make of this argument?
Well, obviously, there's no legal ground to link this poisoning of Navalny with the pipeline project. So it is just by virtue of political imperative that these can be linked.
But that's what sanctions are. But that's what sanctions are, no? I mean, reacting to a political occurrence.
So the for the purposes of companies who invested, and it's not just Gazprom. 5 European companies are involved in the project. Each of them invested or provided loans for the construction in the amount of close to $1 billion each. And so all these participants obviously will have an opportunity to put legal claims and demand their money back, because obviously this is not a force majeure situation. There's no way it can be justified legally as a force majeure situation.
Luke, yeah. And adding on that, Luke, do you think that pulling the plug would threaten Germany's international reputation as a reliable business partner, as some people have argued?
No, I don't. I know this is a very popular argument, but the idea that Germany, of all countries in the world, Germany choosing to halt a pipeline which can be used as a geopolitical tool by Russia because Russia was involved in the assassination attempt with a nerve agent against the Kremlin's top political opponent, is going to make Germany no longer attractive for international investment, I don't believe for a second. And of course, there will be a legal aspect to halting this pipeline. And I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the ins and outs of this. I will fully admit that. But I will say that if a country like Germany, which has about a $4 trillion GDP, a $4 trillion economy, I'm sure that the government can find $8 or $9 billion to reimburse investors. And in the long run, it'll probably save Germany a lot of geopolitical problems with Russia in the future. I think it would be a bargain.
Yeah, what do you make of Vitaly's argument that, as unfortunate as the poisoning of Navalny may be, it ought to be kept and handled separately from a business deal that has been in existence for over a decade?
Yeah, but the world doesn't work that way. Diplomacy doesn't work that way. Geopolitics doesn't work that way. These things are all interconnected, and they're more interconnected now in the 21st century than they have ever been in the past. And the idea that Russia would have carte blanche to do whatever it likes against European interests, and there are no consequences to some sort of business transaction with Russia, I think is nonsensical. And it is clear that economic sanctions are one tool that countries use in terms of in geopolitics, and you have to have you can't separate or differentiate between the economic relationship of one country and then the security relationship or the geopolitical relationship or the energy relationship. These things are all connected.
So, Vitaly, some argue, yes, it might threaten Germany's reputation as a reliable business partner. But what about Russia's reputation, interfering in the Ukraine, interfering in Belarus, poisoning opposition leaders? What kind of reliable business partner is that, some critics say? What's your response?
I don't really understand what you mean by poisoning, interfering, and because there has been absolutely no proofs that the Russian state has been involved in this. And because, just for the sake of argument, very often in discussions, it is possible to use this reductio ad absurdum argument, or trick. Let me put it this way. I didn't want to go into this discussion because I don't think it's productive, but let me introduce the following idea. For example, what would you say if Russia were to call on Europe to introduce a ban on imports of US LNG because George Floyd was killed by US policemen? And obviously that was a case of institutional racism in the state I forgot what particular US state was there. But so this argument is exactly the same logically as the one that is being used currently regarding the poisoning of Navalny. And you're saying that no.
Just for the comparison's sake, who's the leading opposition figure in the US who has been poisoned?
Huh?
I'm not following your argument. Who's the leading opposition figure in US politics who has been poisoned or who ought to be poisoned?
No.
For argument's sake, I don't see quite the connection.
No, what do you mean by leading opposition figure? That's the argument that is being made against Russia that there's some event that took place in Russia, and let's use this as a way that justifies punishing Russia, even though there's absolutely no proof that Russian officials were involved in that. So the accusation has been made. The guilty side has been already appointed without any attempt to really look into the crime or the details of it. And as a result of it, we now are discussing this project that doesn't have anything to do with the Russian internal politics. So this argument is exactly the same logically as if Russia was saying, let's use internal US politics to accuse US of being oppressive to rational minorities, and let's ban imports of US LNG on those grounds.
Yeah.
Why not?
Absolutely. Well, certainly you're not making the connection, but the EU member states and Germany in particular are making the connection. Luke, how do you think this is going to play out? Obviously, time is of essence here. Chancellor Merkel will not stand for re-election next year, so this is not going to endanger her one way or the other. What's your prediction?
I suspect with a lot of these things, it will soon be off the radar for many people, unless there's another very egregious incident by Russia towards some country in Europe, or another use of a nerve agent against a political dissident or a political opponent in the very short term. I believe that with all the COVID global pandemic problems and the economic fallout from the pandemic and the inward looking of US politics right now, the inward nature of EU politics, I believe that people will soon forget about this and Nord Stream 2 will continue on. I hope I'm wrong on that. And it's always dangerous for analysts to make these sort of predictions on television, but I just cannot imagine a situation where Merkel will find the moral fortitude to end this project.
Certainly. So your prediction is this is just a phase. We will focus back on the pandemic. Of course, U.S. elections are coming up in November. That will take up a big part of our attention for sure. Vitaly, what's your prediction? Would you agree that with Luke that Nord Stream 2 will continue nonetheless?
Well, everything is possible, and I simply think we need to look at the consequences before we rush into making hectic decisions. And Nord Stream is a project that would ensure that Europe and Germany would be receiving gas from the new growing source of supply on Yamal Peninsula. Low carbon footprint of this pipeline, practically no methane leakage. It's good for European environmental goals. It is good for energy transition goals. It is going to solve many problems with CO2 emissions right now. We don't have to wait 30 years until this transition is made to make the change. It is going to really help the issues that Europe is facing right now. And suggesting, as Luke did, that Germany is rich enough to write off $9 or $10 billion right away for the sake of this political show, I don't think that's a good idea for Germany.
Luke, before we go, last minute, obviously U.S. elections are coming up. Donald Trump has once again reiterated his criticism of Germany, but said he has no evidence that Moscow has poisoned Navalny. You think this issue will get any play in the United States, or is this merely focused to cater towards the European audience?
Oh, definitely it's to cater towards a European audience. I mean, your average American really doesn't care about this issue one way or the other because, as was already pointed out, we have enough problems, social unrest, economic problems, pandemic problems here in America for us for the average person to focus and worry about. But we shouldn't think also that if there's a change in administration in November, that things will be even easier for Germany on Nord Stream 2. It's likely a Biden administration will take a hawkish approach towards Russia, if for any other reason than the fact that many Democrats blame Russia, rightly or wrongly, for Trump's presidency to begin with. So I suspect that no matter what happens in November, the U.S. The government in the United States will continue its strong pressure to try to block or stop Nord Stream 2.
Nord Stream 2 is certainly a topic that will be with us for some time to come and closely watch. Luke Coffey, Vitaly Yermakov, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your input and participation. And thank you out there for watching, of course. I hope to see you again next time when we are back with a new edition of Newsmakers.